Actually, in 2021, Professor Grzyb and team of co-investigators and collaborators, they obtained a shared partnership grant of over 2 million for the surviving memory in Postwar El Salvador. And since then, actually, the project has been what we call the focal child of Western research. When there's any presentation at Western about research, it comes up. Now I know why. The whole place is filled up, nowhere to sit. So, but we at FIMS, we are excited that we're the own faculty because we get the opportunity of getting regular updates between now and 2028. So, over to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Ishola, and welcome. It's so great to see so many people here on such a cold day. So thanks for coming out, and we're joined by a bunch of people on Zoom as well. I will begin by acknowledging that Western is situated on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Mountain nations. And these territories are connected to the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum and the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796. In the context of our work in El Salvador, it's been really important for our team to understand the connections between the genocidal history and genocidal violence of the residential schools in Canada and the colonial and post-colonial destruction of Indigenous people in El Salvador, particularly in an event referred to as La Matanza, which is the massacre, which was a massacre of at least 10,000 Indigenous people involved in a revolutionary revolt in 1932. And we could talk a little bit more about that maybe during the Q&A. We have a packed agenda. We have 5 speakers today. And I'm going to briefly introduce the other 4, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview and then turn it over to them. And so I'll start with our, just raise your hand as I say your name, that I'll go in order of the speakers. So after me will be Dr. Adriana Alas. She's a Salvadorian anthropologist who's in her 2nd year here at FIMS as a postdoctoral scholar. And she does research on intergenerational memory, and she's working on community books and memorial projects with our partners in Chalatenango, El Salvador. She holds a PhD in social anthropology from the Colegio de Michoacán in Mexico. Next is Yarubi Díaz Colmenares. She's a Venezuelan linguist and PhD candidate in French studies here at Western. Her research focuses on the linguistic representation of women and gender-inclusive language in French and Spanish in non-institutional settings. And Yarubi heads up our transcription and translation team for this project. After that is María Laura Flores Barba. She's a Mexican art historian and PhD candidate in Hispanic Studies at Western with a research focus on colonial painting and local artists. And she heads up our video editing team, and along with Yarubi, trains and supervises a big team of research assistants from undergraduates through to PhD students who are working on our project. And finally, we have Zack MacDonald, who's a map librarian for the Archives and Special Collections team at Western Libraries, and his research focus is on historic GIS, historic building information modeling, historic environment reconstructions, and discovery layers. And he's part of our GIS fieldwork team, along with the amazing Liz Sutherland, who's teaching at Fanshawe and can't be here today. So we're, give thanks to her because she's been so involved in the fieldwork. I also want to acknowledge, as much as I can, the faculty, student, and community members who have been heavily involved in the project. And I'm only mentioning those involved in the Massacres mapping project. We have a team that involves hundreds of people. So I want to acknowledge Reynaldo Hernandez, Felipe Tobar, Felipe Quintanilla, Fran Mejia, Maritza Andagoya, Katie Calderon, Sean Robertson, Giada Ferrucci, Jaime Brenes Reyes, Nicolas Rivera, Miriam Ayala, Edith Cruz, Teofilo Cordova, Angel Grande Rodriguez, Rina Moreno, Farah Shohib, Jessica Larios, Will Guardado, Bianca Moreno Rivera, Loreno Mancana de Mesa, Danielle Zapata, Owen Cook, Tata Mendez, Mike Kachabaugh, David Heap, and Bernie Hammond. And if I missed anyone, apologies. So I'm going to start with a testimony. On May 14th, 1980, a 23-year-old subsistence farmer and community leader named Felipe Tobar gathered with more than 1,000 other campesinos and campesinas in Las Horadas, a hamlet on the banks of the Sumpul River in the department of Chalatenango, near the Salvadorian-Honduran border. They had taken refuge in this historically demilitarized zone over the previous few days, fleeing US-backed Salvadorian armed forces that had recently moved into the region as part of an anti-guerrilla counterinsurgency operation. As the soldiers, the Salvadorian National Guard, and the paramilitary group Orden descended on the civilians, gunfire lit up the landscape, seeming to come at them from every direction. Many people dropped to the ground seeking protection behind stone fences. Others, including Tobar, ran for the river. I could see nothing but people, full of fear, drowning, trying to escape, he recounted in August 2017. I jumped into the water and I was caught in the current. In the agony of death, I managed to pull myself onto the shore, coughing up the water that I had swallowed. He climbed to the top of a ravine and watched his 2 Salvadorian helicopters strap the people hiding by the fences. Salvadorian foot soldiers opened fire on the civilians struggling in the river, and the Honduran military forced back those who made it across the border alive. By the end of the action, there were approximately 600 civilians killed, mostly women, children, and elderly people. And today we refer to this event as the Sumpul River Massacre, and it was a pivotal moment in the nascent Salvadoran Civil War, which raged from 1980 to 1992. Not only was it one of the first military campaigns in which the Salvadorian government enacted its brutal scorched earth strategy, but it also created one of the earliest groups of Salvadorian war refugees as recognized by the United Nations. As the Salvadorian armed forces deployed their death squads across the departments of Chalatenango, Cabañas, and Morazán, news of other massacres, including the Lempa River Massacre in March 1981 and the El Mozote Massacre in December 1981, reached the international community, but hundreds of smaller massacres remained in obscurity. By the end of the war, 75,000 Salvadorians were dead, 1/3 of the population was displaced, and countless civilians had survived torture, imprisonment, starvation, exhaustion, child abductions, aerial bombardments, extrajudicial killings, sexual violence, and massacres. Despite official denials by the Salvadorian government, survivor accounts of death squads and massacres were ultimately corroborated by the United Nations Commission on the Truth for El Salvador. In its final report entitled From Madness to Hope, published in 1993, the commission held Salvadorian state actors responsible for 85% of wartime violations, including the Sumpul River Massacre. The commission registered a total of 22,000 complaints of serious acts of violence, as outlined institutional forms of brutality ranging from repression to disappearances to mass killing operations. The Truth Commission called on the Salvadorian state to, quote, provide reparations for the victims, including memorials and monetary compensation, a directive that no post-war government, left, right, or what we might call Trump adjacent, has adequately realized. 44 years after the Civil War began, the documentation of state violence lies with predominantly with communities. And this includes commemoration activities, community healing, and reconciliation. And these community organizations operate at a very local level with very limited resources and funding. Surviving Memory in Postwar El Salvador was established in 2017 to accompany the memory work of survivors in rural Salvadorian communities. Our research is supported by Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, the Canadian Foundation for Innovation, the Ontario Research Fund, Research Western, Asociación Sumpul, Western Libraries, and the faculties of Music, Science, Health Sciences, Schulich, Arts and Humanities, and FIMS. Did I already mention FIMS? And FIMS, which is the home faculty. Thank you. We have also 22 other partners who make contributions, as well as the United Nations Development Program, LIUNA OPDC, LIUNA Local 183, and the Loretto Sisters of Toronto. Our project has over 100 active researchers. So there's a lot of people working on various initiatives and 22 partners, as I mentioned. Our project is led by survivor organizations. So Asociación Sumpul, which is an organization of survivors in Chalatenango, is the key partner in this project. And our governance structure is very horizontal, and we use a consensus-based decision-making model. So the way this works is that we have general assemblies with community members, stakeholders, partners, researchers, students, and we make decisions about how to proceed with the research, backed up by exploratory workshops and really working to meet the priorities that are identified by the communities and by survivor groups in El Salvador. Our research methodology is participatory and collaborative, and you'll be hearing a bit more about that in a moment. And this is an approach that we often refer to as accompaniment. We have developed, as you see here, 8 core themes. We developed these themes over 2 strategic planning, I don't want to say sessions, it took lots of months, but initiatives, let's say, in 2017 and in 2020. And you can see here the areas on which we focus: environmental reparation, mental health and healing, commemoration, art, music, and theater, documentation and testimonies, justice, intergenerational education, and local economic development. This is going to be painful for me, but I am going to move through these really, really quickly. I want to give you a sense of all of the projects that we're working on, but if I was to talk about each one of these slides, it would take an hour. So I am going to, exercise maximum restraint and just like move through the slides quickly, or we're going to be here for a really long time. So we're talking about the mapping today, but to give you a sense of the breadth of the project, the other areas in which we work are community archives, digitization, and preservation of community materials, and also materials of solidarity workers who spent time in El Salvador in the 80s. We engage in community photo exhibitions, and we've been doing so since 2017 with these archival materials. Workshops and capacity building are the backbone of our project. So this is how we plan research, how we execute it, and how we evaluate it. We also engage in a number of capacity building initiatives. So we have a lot of equipment funded by CFI and ORF. And we have an oral history and documentation lab here at FIMS, and we also have one in San Jose Las Flores in El Salvador. And so we have filmmakers and other technical experts who work with community members, community leaders, local historians, and especially youth and women to train them to use the equipment that we have there, which includes cameras and GIS and editing equipment and so forth. We are engaged in developing an interactive music archive. Dr. Emily Ansari in music is overseeing this project and also doing field recordings as well as music education workshops in El Salvador and with the Salvadorian diaspora. We have a strong focus on mental health research and training, and we have mental health professionals in El Salvador accompanying us in all of our fieldwork and workshops in order to provide support for survivors. We have a lot of community art projects. Here's one example of a mural in San Jose Las Flores, which depicts the repopulation from the refugee camps back to Las Flores in 1986 and 87. And we do a lot of work with testimonies and documentary film as well. And this is embedded in many of the projects that we work on. We focus a lot on community commemorations, building capacity and fortifying the commemorations that were happening before our project was initiated, and then providing support for commemorations in new massacre sites that we have uncovered through our research. We also have a whole area of the project on recovering traditional knowledge, which focuses on traditional plants, medicines, and materials. And this is a growing area of the project and also involves a mapping component. We have a wonderful architectural team in El Salvador and Belgium focused on the architectural co-design of memorials. We have finished one pilot project at the Sumpul Memorial site. It will be finished in May, thanks to external funding from the UNDP and LAUNA. We now have architectural design for 5 other massacre memorials, as well as plaques that we'll be putting at the other sites. We're also working on the co-design of community museums, both a digital online museum of Salvadorian migration to Canada in partnership with the Salvadorian Canadian Association, and 2 physical museums in Arquitao and San Jose Las Flores. And the architects have developed designs for those museums, and the communities have provided space for them. And then finally, there's the massacre mapping, which I will run through quite quickly. Lost in my notes here. So during the first phase of strategic planning in 2017, it was a priority of the survivor community to create both physical and digital maps of massacres in Chalatenango and eventually in all of El Salvador was the hope. The Truth Commission didn't have any comprehensive documentation of the massacres. There were hundreds of them, so they didn't have all of the locations. They certainly didn't have all of the names of victims, the names of the perpetrators. And in some cases, entire communities or families were wiped out. And so, some of that data will never be recovered, unfortunately. And no government has pursued any kind of systematic investigation of the massacres. So Parque Cuscatlan is a memorial in San Salvador where there are some of the names. It represents about 50% of the massacres that we've documented in Chalatenango that are mentioned on that memorial, but it is an incomplete list. Equipo Maíz, a nonprofit organization in San Salvador, has a list of about 55 massacres in Chalatenango where we're currently working. On our list now, we have about 68, and that number grows every time we visit communities. And every time we visit a site, in fact. And next week, we will be returning to El Salvador to extend our project from Chalatenango into Cabañas, Morazán, and Cuscatlan, and we'll begin to spread the map out over the rest of the country. Just very briefly, I want to tell you a bit about the process, and then I'll hand it over to my colleagues. So we begin by developing a research program and itinerary for the fieldwork. This is a process that is led by survivors in general assemblies and organized by the leadership of Asociación Sumpul in collaboration with our team. This allows the process to remain community-led. Survivors maintain control of the process, the pace, and their participation in the work. And of course, we have incorporated an informed consent process based on our multi-jurisdictional ethics protocol. Next, we travel to massacre sites. Some of them are accessible in villages and on roadsides, but many of them, most of them require long hikes from 2 to 3 hours to get to the site and then 2 to 3 hours to get back. And on these trips, we're accompanied by survivors, our GIS specialists, researchers, and representatives from Asociación Sumpul, as well as interested youth and mental health professionals. Next, we obtain the GPS coordinates. Zach will talk a bit more about this. But we had one set of coordinates that were kind of inaccurate. And once we got our really good equipment, we were able to go back and get very high resolution verification of all of those sites. And now we continue to use that equipment moving forward. Next, we use ArcGIS and Survey 123 to collect and organize data. Some of the sites are very well known by survivors and visited on an annual basis, and some we still haven't found yet. One example is Los Raudas. We've made now 5 attempts to reach that site, and we think we will eventually have to introduce LiDAR to be able to find the mass grave that's located there. We record testimonies at the site if the survivors wish to share their stories, and then document the information with Survey 123 about the names of perpetrators, victims, the number of victims. We take photos of the site and so forth. We also obtain drone footage, and we'll be working probably with 360 cameras in the near future. Next, we bring it back to our lab. My colleagues will talk more about that process. There's a lot of transcription, editing of videos, translation, subtitles, and then putting the videos up on YouTube and attaching them to the map. We cross-reference our data with local archives, news articles, and previous scholarly research, if any exists. And then we work with the architects on the design of memorials. And here you see the Walsinga massacre site. Survivors are looking at a design concept the architects have brought to the site at the location, so they can sort of visualize it. I'm going to say really briefly, as I run behind me, a demo of the beta version of the map, so you can kind of see a video of how the map is navigated. I want to just say a couple of things about what we've learned through this process. One of the main things that we've learned is that mapping binds together all of those 8 core themes that I described at the beginning. Because of the way that memory is embedded into the landscapes in our partner communities. It is related to intergenerational knowledge, to the memorials and establishment of plaques at the site, commemorations. It becomes a loci for community art projects, and we are able to make links between the trails, the massacre sites, the memorials, and our community museum projects, which are currently being conceptualized. It allows us to document names, to document testimonies, to exercise a form of community justice through exhumation of victims. It relates to our focus on traditional knowledge and mental health. It's also tremendously complex. So working at sites of memory collaboratively with survivors has really nuanced our understandings of the massacres. They are not just one point, as you can probably see in the map demo. There are points of capture, points of torture, points of sexual violence, points of killing, and points of burial. And so as soon as we get to a site, it's not about mapping one point, but about mapping sometimes 10 or 12. And the last point is that bottom-up documentation is really urgent. After 6 years of collaborative work between survivors, youth, and community leaders and the international members of our team, it's clear to all the participants in the mapping project that it is really important that this bottom-up memory work is supported. It's more crucial now than ever. We lost many survivors, some of who provided testimonies in 2018 and 2019 during the pandemic. The survivors are aging, and the Salvadorian government has not, sorry, that was loud, has not engaged in the recommendations of the UN Commission. So that really is living with the communities at the grassroots level. So I will stop there and turn it over to Adriana Alas, and we'll hear a little bit more about the fieldwork process. Yeah, you can have my drink spot.
Well, thank you very much for being here with us. It means a lot for the team in Canada and the team in El Salvador as well. Well, my name is Adriana Alas. I'm a Salvadoran scholar, and I come from a family with an extended rural and migrant heritage. My family's roots are in Chalatenango, where the Surviving Memory Project is based. My role in the field is connected to these roots. I support the translation and interviewing work at massacre sites during our long walks. I conduct interviews, translate testimonies and data, and explain how the equipment works and the ethical considerations in every case. Translating testimonies, data, or interviewing, it's complex for many reasons, but in particular, because of the vocabulary from Chalatenango's Spanish and ample vocabulary developed during the war, that I think my colleagues are gonna talk a little bit about that. And also because of the emotional charge of the testimonies. There are a lot of sensitive moments during the interview, moments of crying, happiness, suspense, and uncertainty that as an interviewer, I need to address while we are recording. The collaboration with survivors has many revealing moments. The one I would like to highlight in this short talk is the necessity to talk. As a Salvadoran scholar, I grew up in an official environment where talking about the war was infertile because officially we should forgive and forget. A convenient position for the general amnesty law and the perpetrators. So trying to document, think, and dig into the war history has always been like swimming countercurrent. The Surviving Memory Project and the MAP project are opening spaces we did not have in the past. The project is a space for talking, for sharing stories, for asking questions, and for honoring the victims. A space where victims are leading the way to continue. The necessity to talk has made this project grow organically. This is Genaro Guardado, the first one in the picture, the closest one, a very committed collaborator in this project. We went to the community where he lived before the war, along with many survivors, youth, and scholars. I remember I was explaining to Genaro the mapping project and the main goal, documenting massacre and assassinations among other violence against civilians during the war. I remember he looked at me and asked, "Entonces usted quiere saber todo, so you want to know everything?" He didn't let me reply, and he answered himself. Entonces le voy a decir todo. So I'm going to tell you everything. That day, Genaro told us about massacres of entire families that are not in any other archive. People he buried himself, remembering the victims with honor as part of La Laguna de San Ramon community members. Genaro's community before the war was close to my great-grandmother's community, and every time I looked at Genaro, I think of her. I remember telling Genaro this, so he immediately started trying to look for connections between our families. We couldn't find any, partly because of my limited knowledge of my family history due to the war. We dropped off Genaro at his community. He looked at me with a smile and told me, me da gusto saber que nuestras familias vivían cerca, que somos del mismo lugar. I'm glad to know that our families live nearby and that we are from the same place. It didn't matter that we couldn't make any family connections because connection was already made. We were from the same place. Families who lived close and shared the Montañona Valley and the Chalatenango rural life. Well, this is only one story of how this project can build, rebuild, or reimagine relationships. Genaro is part of many projects, and I work in the Chalatenango community, especially the community groups. And finally, the importance of documenting memory. Well, the necessity to talk about the war is not only a survivor's interest, but also growing in younger generations who are involved in many historical memory projects. Even research is one of the main achievements of the Survivoring Memory Project. The necessity to talk is developed from what the communities are ready to talk about, what they want to say to a broader public, or what they want to share in a small workshop or in a one-to-one interview that would follow the survivors' wishes of anonymity, or what is it for? A map, an article, a book, a song. The necessity to talk is shaped by the victims and their descendants. So it addresses their concerns in honoring the good name of the victims, documenting their memories, naming the perpetrators, and generously sharing their painful stories to prevent another war in El Salvador. This last image is Don Felipe Tobar, who Amanda spoke a little bit about him. He survived several massacres and attacks from the army during the Civil War. And in this photo is the one that is there next to me. In this photo, we were walking towards La Sarada site, where the Sumpul massacre happened. Amanda also gave us some background on that. It is a long walk, and we must take breaks. While walking towards a massacre site, breaks have become synonyms for knowledge exchange. And in this image, Don Felipe is telling us his survival story from the Sumpul massacre. And I remember him saying, every time I have the chance, I would tell my story so others can know what happened on this land. And he has continued telling the stories on every occasion. Well, that's what I want to share. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll be sharing with you some insights and experiences from our transcription and translation team. I'll address just a little bit about our working processes and some of the challenges of these tasks. So let me see here. So although the project fieldwork takes place in El Salvador, the transcription and translation team is mostly here in Western. Is a team made of undergraduate and graduate students, with the collaboration, of course, and the support of the faculty and Salvadoran community members. We, as students, come from different disciplines and have different levels of fluency in at least 2 of the target languages. So we work with Spanish, English, and of course, this is mostly an international and interdisciplinary team, and we do like a lot of different documents, but today I'll be sharing some of the challenges related to the testimonies of massacre survivors. So just let me see what's okay, so of course, this is a collaborative work. All of our files and documents we work with are worked by multiple people at the same time. So it's nourished by different skills. And we have weekly meetings. So this is always like ongoing training. And we create and use shared tools for documentation. So other than consulting with Salvadorian members, we look in dictionaries, forums, blogs, and we try to register all that information in shared documents. And it's a way to guarantee the shared knowledge of the team. I will share with you some examples about these documents. Of course, there is open communication and continuous learning. We have a feedback culture because we are all the time receiving and giving productive feedback to do better documents. So let me see here. Okay, let me play a little bit here. Okay. We
Just a
tried
sec.
this before
Oops.
we start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a notification. It interrupted everything.
Oh, yeah, it did make a sound earlier.
Yeah.
You do a voiceover?
Yeah, of course, I was thinking about it. It's not going to be that pretty as the real voice.
Yeah, I'm not
Okay,
sure what's
no,
going on.
it's not a problem. It's
Okay,
okay.
just a second.
So I wanted to let you hear María Celia, but here you have the extra. So it says, después de ese momento, ya fue guindear, ya fue de guinda. Ya no fue de dormir en la casa, sino que andar, como dicen. Hoy está uno aquí, mañana ya, porque ya éramos perseguidos. So in this case, María Celia uses the verb guindear. So for me, as a native Spanish speaker, I'm Venezuelan, so I can, if I know nothing about the historical context of this extract, I will not understand. So that's one of the examples that we need to document a lot, to do these transcriptions and translations, and to speak with Salvadorans. So she also used guinda, and with consulting the sources that we use, we now know that guinda, it could be on the run, and the verb guindear is to flee. It could be some of the options that we use in order to be culturally accurate and also respectful of the sense. Okay, so I'm going to show you another example. I will try to show you another example, sorry. So, okay. Okay. Okay, so this is an example of our work documents. So this is a extract of the glossary in yellow. So you can see here how we record the term guinda and guindear. You see it's a noun or a verb, and you have the definition in Spanish. And then we add the English or French equivalents. Okay, so now we have almost like 500 terms. So they are like nouns, adjectives, and expressions. We also register the sources. If it's a person, we just put the name of the person from El Salvador who helped us with the meaning. Those are examples of our databases. So the first one is an example with tattoo. It's a dugout cave. So we can, for example, know all the documents where we can find the term. And in that way, we can read the term in context, okay? As any corpus, linguistic corpus. And here you have a database of medicinal plants where we register all the plants that were named in a specific folder or dossier. Okay, this is another example I wanted to share with you. Sorry, I cannot play the sound, but here, Antonio Alfaro Castillo, the interviewer asked, ¿y usted sabe qué pasó con los cuerpos? And he answered, bueno, allí no sé yo, porque como no sé si la familia les vendría a levantar los huesitos de ellos. So what is interesting here is the use of the word huesitos, which is a diminutive in Spanish. If you do like a literal translation, it's like little bones. But in this case, he's not talking about the size of the bones. One of the meanings of the diminutive in Spanish could be like the feeling or the attitude of the speaker. So you can transmit like affection, respect, or warmth. So if I use little bones, it's not like a good translation. So we do a lot of discussions about it. Some of the translators think that it should be just bones because the little doesn't it's not the meaning. But some others think that we could use something like dearest reminds. Remains. Sorry. So it's not a literal translation, but it could reflect more the feeling of the person, because when they use huesitos, they are trying to be respectful and show the affection to the remainings that are there, okay? So we spend a lot of time with this kind of discussions. Sometimes we are never happy with the product. It's very difficult because, as I keep repeating, we try to be respectful and also linguistically accurate, and it's never easy. Those are, I think, the limit, for example, of automated translation, because a robot is not able to understand huesitos in that case. And the last example I wanted to show you, if I can, is Mi Hermana la Combatienta. So in this case, Serafina is talking about her sister, and she used the word combatienta. What's the thing here? This term means woman fighter, but if you look, for example, in the most known and respected dictionary for Spanish, you are not going to find the word. So you are just going to find the masculine word, which is combatiente. Okay, so in this case, we cannot say that Serafina is making a mistake. She's using language as she should. So this use carries significant purpose. The use of combatienta is not a language mistake. It's bringing visibility to the often overlooked contribution of women during the Salvadoran Civil War. And it serves as a linguistic tool to address the historical gender imbalance in narrative surrounding wartime experiences. So if I do the transcription and I put combatiente because it's not in the dictionary, I'm committing like a linguistic crime, I think. And if I do the translation, for example, to English, English doesn't have this need of marking the gender like Spanish or French. So what can I do? If I do just fighter, I'm not expressing this voluntad. This desire or wish to express the visibility of women. So I need to put an extra translation and put woman fighter. And in that way, I'm being like more, expressing more fidelity to the original text, okay? Let me see. I'm sorry, I wanted to let you hear their voices, but at least I'm showing some of the beautiful words and important terms that they use. This is just a summary about our key contributions and impact to the project. But in summary, transcriptors, as you see, we collaborate by providing written record that can be an easily reference to the whole project, and is also a way of registering linguistic patrimony. And for translator, of course, it's a pivotal role in engaging a wider audience. And we try to build connection. We have to build connections with diverse communities, share resources, and promote, of course, cultural understanding. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay, so for the part of the video editing process, I also had some sounds, but you're not gonna be able to hear them. So I'm gonna explain. So the very important public facing of the map is the testimonies by the survivors, as Amanda already explained. We have a huge amount of material to work with from the testimonies in the field work. And we have to connect that material not only to the map, but among the stories themselves, because stories connect to each other and the stories connect to different places. And well, it's a very complex task to just be able to build a story. So there has been a lot of iterations of the work for the testimonies, for the video editing testimonies. So there had been a previous team that was working on editing, so it's always changing, and it's always we're building on the work of other people, right? So right now the video editing team is made up of mostly undergraduate work studies students who are interested in media or interested in social justice or interested in audio editing. So shout out to the video editing team who is here, all here, and graduate students as well, faculty who supervise all the post-production things that we need to do with the videos. And also we have consultation with the survivors. So it is very important when we have questions about the story, about the massacre, whatever, we can go back to them and ask them and be more accurate with our storytelling. So one of the examples of a complex site is the Dugoncitos massacre that happened on May 8th, 1980. So you can see there, it is a trail. The lowest point there is the start of the commemoration trail, because these sites, not only, they are still alive in the present. They not only tell stories of the past, but also the present. So people every year on May, they go to the site and they go bring flowers to the how do you say that? Tombs, and they walk all that path, right? So they start there. Then the middle point is the site of burial, where the bodies are buried, and then the upper part is where the group of 4 women were killed. So they had to carry the bodies from the upper part, from the upper point to the lower point to bury them. So it's not only there's not only stories of fleeing, of climbing and walking, but also about carrying the bodies, which is very sad and difficult. So this was also like an excerpt of a video where Leonza is talking about how she climbed, how she walked, and she was exhausted. So when the survivors are telling us their testimonies, they use these words, right? These words that refer to location and refer to place and space. So we have to be very careful with that when we are building the story, so that we can record all the places that we're telling us about, and to know if because they sometimes say, okay, so that house over there, so then we have to go there and like to see the site, right? Then there is Israel Castillo Dubon. She's talking about how they had to bring the bodies. So cuando regresamos al punto donde estábamos, él ya estaba muerto. He found someone dead. And then they had to brought that body from where they found it to the grave. So he's pointing at all the locations that he's talking about, right? And then finally, well, this is a song. So sometimes testimonies are not only stories, but they are also songs. So this woman is talking about her mom, how she was killed when she was 2 years old, and her mom was pregnant when she was killed. So she comes every year and she composed a song for her mom. And she brings her flowers, and in that moment, she wanted to sing the song, and she shared the song with us. And well, these are some stats of our videos. It is, well, the YouTube channel, we started it on October 2021. Yeah. And if you see the spike there, this is where we started releasing the massacre videos. So the views grew as soon as we started releasing them, even though we didn't publicize them, we didn't do any like opening or like presentation about the map or the video, so that people started watching the videos without us knowing it. So it was very surprising to see how many views we have until now. So 175,000 from 2021 to today, even though we haven't really officially presented the project. It is important too to see where these views come from. So most of them are from the United States. And we think that people in the United States are watching the videos, but that are from the Salvadoran diaspora, right? So they live mostly in these cities, in Los Angeles, Houston, New York, and Baltimore, because those are the places where most of the Salvadoran diaspora live in the United States, but also San Salvador. So it is very important to us to have also these numbers, because it means that the people in Salvador are engaging with the material. It's not only, the material is not only being produced and read by the academia, but also the community members, because they are watching their relatives on the videos, and they are giving us feedback as well. So, and we know that because also the Spanish subtitles are the most used. So it's not English speaking people who are watching the video, but Spanish speaking people. So that means that mostly maybe the Salvadoran community or even the Spanish speaking community is watching the video. So that's why it is very important for us to have accurate transcriptions and to be very truthful to what the survivor is telling. Also here we have our top 5 most popular videos. So our most popular person here is Maria Vilma. That was the first video that we released. So it's still the most popular about well, these 2 are part of the map, and these 3 were released as a separate project. But for example, this one, Niña Felix, she also gave us our testimony, and then she died during the pandemic. So we created like a commemorative video, and it is very popular as well among the community. And yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, thank you.
So in the last few minutes, I'm going to do a whirlwind tour of some of the technology, the hardware and software that we use in the field for collecting spatial data, some of the workflows we use in the field, and bringing it back to our mapping software to get it into our interactive mapping applications, and then touch on some technology and some projects that we're hoping to take on in the near future that leverage the work that we're doing now, and will make use of some new technologies. So I was supposed to say that while this video was playing, but just if this clears up. This is just a drone shot from one of our sites at Cervivo. And I'll talk about it a bit later because this gives you a sense of some of the challenges we have with the data collection in the field, with the terrain and some of the tree cover that we deal with, and just the remoteness of some of the sites with some of the technology that we have to carry into the field, not just the video equipment, but also the GPS. So this will hopefully give you a sense of where we have to lug some of this equipment to, because it's important with some of the things that we're trying to accomplish. It takes bigger equipment, and also just how fantastic it is to be able to go to some of these places, despite the topics and the context in which we're doing this work. Here we go. Oops. Giving it away. Okay, so the most important piece, and it's show and tell too. I brought a lot of this hardware along with me because it gives you a good idea of what we're working with. So the most important piece that we're working with right now with the field data collection is our GPS receiver. So all of you have this basically in your smartphones now, but if you think of the size of the antenna in your smartphone, this is the size of the antenna that we're working with. And you can see for our initial workflow, the first picture on the left there, myself and Liz. In most of the pictures of our field research, it looks like I'm just texting the whole time. But in the initial workflow, we had one smartphone connected via Bluetooth to this receiver, and Liz would collect the data point from the GPS, so to get a precision GPS location. And I would be entering everything in the field survey. And we would have somebody translating with us to make sure that we're getting the proper information when we were doing field interviews. Our new workflow is a little bit different. But just to give you a sense of how important this is, the middle picture there is an image, a screenshot from the GPS receiver workflow. And so live in the field in El Salvador, we were accessing 31 different satellites to be able to get an accurate location. So when we're there, we can actually see live how many satellites we're working with. 30 is usually our threshold to get really precise location information. But between this and what you would have on your phone, you're working with 10 versus 30. And it's really important if you're going to get really detailed information in the field. And we can also put this on a backpack now, because walking around like this to get those paths that we're doing for the commemoration trails doesn't really work. So we've invested in a new backpack to take that on as well. And then once we're in the field with that, what we've done now is connected the workflow into a single form. So the GPS receiver connects to one phone with, on the right, you can see our survey 123 form, and our translator or interviewer will be working with that. So the person with the GPS receiver gets the precise location, usually has to stand there for 30 seconds to a minute to get an average location to ensure it's really accurate. And then the other person can work through with the community member or a collaborator that's giving us the information about the site that we're at to collect all the information. So the metadata, the description of the site, and then imagery, video, or sound. And because we're working in a GIS application, once we get back from the field, we can update that with more archival imagery or other information that we're pulling from some of our sites as well. So with this process, we can get single points. So you see all those dots, those paths that we're doing. So those commemoration trails or escape trails or other like pathways that we're trying to document. And then we can also do areas. So if we do have an entire area that we need to map out, we can walk the perimeter and then connect all of our data to that as well. And it all starts with that GPS receiver. And I'll show you in a minute. Amanda alluded to it earlier, why it's so important to get that precision data with that receiver. So in addition to the GPS data, one of the things that we're trying to improve is the resolution of our imagery. And then also coming back, we're going to go through some point validation. This is what we're going to talk about what Amanda said. Validating the points that we took in the field originally with mobile devices. So the big picture on the right there, Amanda mentioned earlier, she took a location for Cervivo, and then we went back with our precision receiver. So this is a test we did to just check the difference. And it was a little far off. So it's 1.77 kilometers. And this is the site in that opening drone scene. So the site in blue there is with the GPS receiver on the side of that hill face. It's basically a cliff. And Amanda's phone point actually put us on the other side of the valley, which if we're going back to find, and these are, there's unexhumed bodies in this location. So if we were to use this spatial data to have a team go out to try and recover those bodies, it wouldn't be accurate enough to put them even in the right location, let alone close enough to find where those bodies might be. So the first test that really validated that this piece of equipment is really important and was worth the investment. And then we also tested commercial GPS units in the field. So the top left there is a difference in yellow between the Aero Gold that we were using and my Garmin watch, just to see if we could send other teams out with cheaper equipment to get location data, because that would allow us to expand the scope of what we're doing. And you can see in the red, that's from my watch. You can see in some locations, it's pinging right off the accurate GPS location. And in others, it puts us on Honduras. So it's actually across the river. So again, if we're having a path that we want people to follow, it wasn't going to work with a commercial grade GPS. So even something in between something like the Aero Gold and on your phone, it wasn't accurate enough in the field just because we don't have access to the satellites there. And then talking about precision, so we say we're close. The bottom left is a test that we ran with some of our locations and running it off a base station. So base stations are really big receivers like this that let you triangulate your location really, really precisely to make sure it's basically data validation again. And if you can, I'm not sure if you can see the numbers on the screen there, but I think it's 0.02, 0.07. Any idea what those units are? Flat, too large. No, it's a distant measurement. So distance, any guesses? No, it's millimeters. So we're within 0.02 millimeters of the actual location based on the base station. So we're getting really precise GPS location data. So when we're in the field, the location data is the first step, but we're also adding other data sets, spatial data, to add more context to the sites that we're looking at. So this is when we get into talking about the drone. Thanks, Bobby. The drones that we're using. So the places that we're hiking are pretty remote. So right now we're mapping, and that early imagery you saw was from this drone here. So this is the Mini 3 Pro. I can put it in my backpack and hike out. And when we travel on Sunday, actually, we can now do mission planning with it. So we can send it up automated in this area that we want to map, and it will take overlap images, which means we can do an orthomosaic, which is basically a 3D map, or we can do photogrammetry with it. So we want to do 3D scanning. And this will give us much more accurate and clear mapping and terrain data underneath the sites we're adding that GPS. So just for example, on the right, this is the Esri imagery. So basically as good as you can get for public access imagery at the Sumpul Massacre Memorial site. And at the same site, so zoomed in a little more because we have the resolution. This is the same site with our drone imagery. So just with this little drone, this is the kind of resolution we're getting. So just for reference, that middle dot with a bit of brown around it is that same image. So we're able to go out now and add a map at that resolution of all of these sites. So some of the other technology that we're working with, and this is more my field, is historic GIS, which is where you take historical maps and georeference them. So put them into a GIS so you have them in their actual real world location, and then digitize some of the points. And we're doing this because when you're working with historical environments, things change. So on the left, you have the current OpenStreetMap of La Laguna, so the site we were talking about earlier with an arrow. And you can see our points where we've captured data and then what's left of the community there today. So the current community, not a lot of structures. And if you look at 1983, early in the Civil War, you can see, especially up the top left there, the number of buildings and structures that we have there. So today, compared to 1983, La Laguna is basically destroyed. There's not much left. So this allows us to add more context to what these communities actually look like. So if you use current imagery or current maps, you don't see the scale of the communities in which these people are talking about. So it's really important to be able to add this context. I'm gonna really rush through the last little bit. And it also leads us into where my research really sits and what we're hoping to do in the future, which is to go into the field. And so this is actually on the top left, the remains of an Anaro's house. So some of the stone foundations, and because it's adobe mud brick, over time, it just kind of melts back into the landscape. So you can see in the bottom picture there, just the outline of the remains of his original house. So by going there and just taking some quick measurements and looking at images of buildings that were built at the same time, so coeval structures, things like that, I just quickly did a 3D reconstruction of what that building might have looked like. And so the idea behind this is, like with our interactive map applications, to have virtual exhibits that give more context to what things look like on the ground. And then also be able to connect the same kinds of archival and archaeological, not so much archaeological, I'm thinking about other stuff now, archival and historical memory documents into these 3D models. So what that looks like in reality is it starts building what's called a discovery layer, where, like with the maps, you can access all of this information in something like a game engine or a virtual environment. Excuse me. And this is what it looks like. So this is a quick reconstruction that I did in Unreal Engine. And so you can see, as you navigate a landscape that's now destroyed, nothing's left there, you can see the information that we've embedded in these structures. And as you walk around to these sites, where there are no buildings, you can see some of the history, and we could actually embed some of the video of the testimonials in an exhibit like this. So people who aren't able to visit these sites because they're remote can see what it would have looked like during the Civil War and connect those stories and documents to it. I'm a few minutes over, but we're good. Well, that's the end of it. So that's kind of the end of the future projects. And just because we mentioned LiDAR earlier, and the reason I wanted to show that drone footage is because thanks to Ed Istala and anthropology, we have this other drone here that actually has a LiDAR camera on it. If we pick it up, because I want to break it. So this is really heavy, and it comes with about 80 pounds of batteries to be able to run it. And this is really hard to bring into the field with us if we want to be able to do LiDAR, which is light detection and ranging. So you can 3D scan and see below tree canopy. So if we're looking for sites that you can't see, and this is how they find things like mine ruins in the jungle, we can't actually take this down with us until we know where we're going, and getting it into the field is really difficult. So to be able to do that and just to get it to El Salvador would be a challenge. But in the future, to be able to do these accurate reconstructions and to build the terrain in a virtual reconstruction that is reflective of the actual landscape, that's the kind of technology that we're going to need to take down, so we can start revealing those building footprints and the landscape, start building back up again, and then add all of that documentation and data into it. And I'm gonna end there so we have some questions. Thank you.
We're remarkably on time. I said, let's finish like no later than 1 o'clock, and it's 1:04. No thanks to me, because I talked about it. But we do have about 10-15 minutes for questions or comments.
Well, thank you all for this work. I have a hard time finding the right term to describe. Sorry. Hard to find the right word. But I was wondering, have you had internal discussions about relations or the use of words or maybe concepts of the difference between data and memory? And maybe also the difference between knowledge and acknowledgement? Which I get a feeling from this work that this would be a thing we'd be thinking about. But I was wondering if you could maybe talk about your thoughts on that.
Anyone want to tackle that one? Maybe it's something, we need to think about a little bit. What was the first one? There was knowledge and acknowledgement and data and memory.
Yeah.
I think, well, for my part, it happens all the time when we're listening to the testimonies, because a person will say it's 5 people who died there, and then another one would say no, it's 4 people, and then someone else would remember something different, because that's how memory works, right? So yeah, we have had those problems but we cannot, it's not that easy to go back to the facts, because there's no research about all the massacres and about all the things that happened. So we really don't have anything to compare to. So maybe we're relying, we are using the testimonies to build this story, but we know that memory is memory, right? It's not the same as the truth or the facts or history. So yes, I think we encounter that at every moment, but I don't know, if we have to do that, try to be very accurate and trying to go to get the truth or the facts, the actual facts, because I don't think that's.
And I think I would say so the community members that we work with have been having a lot of dialogues about the importance of what they call historical memory. And one of our partners did a really interesting workshop on memory versus historical memory. What is the difference between these two concepts? And, memory is something for an individual, right? It's memories that you have. And historical memory is something for the community. It's something that is collective. And I would say in the Gramscian sense, there's a kind of consent building that happens around how memory functions in communities and how it is important for political identity, for ways of thinking about your generational relationship to the Civil War. And, you know, some memories are more dominant than others. And this is part of Adriana's research actually, is to look at, you know, repopulated groups who have come to places where original people have also repopulated, and the tensions between the memory of the left wing, the insurgents, and the memory of the center or the right. So I think those discussions are happening, but maybe with different terminology. Yeah.
And actually, just one other point on that, because you mentioned tension, and one of the tensions that we have, and a limitation really of using GIS, is that we have to categorize things so much, especially when we're filling out the form, that forces us to think about things like data when we're importing them into the form. But then that's why having the video testimonies attached to those data points is so important, because it adds both at the same time and problematizes them a little bit as well in the same application. Because with Liz and I, we have to think about things as data, but there's so many human elements to them that we have to add flexibility into the application if we can.
And the learning curve for that has been huge, because when we started, you know, working with Asociación Sumpul in 2018, and we went to the first sites, we made like 24 mistakes, right? In terms of how we recorded videos and thinking like, I will never forget that this point is connected to this place. And then we get home and we're like, wait a second, you know, and then we have to go back, and there's a lot of work of like reconstructing with the survivors for some of the early material that fit. So, I mean, that's another kind of data and memory conflict, right? Sometimes our own memory. Other questions? Yes.
The research project is about forensic anthropologists in Colombia and Peru. And there they work really closely with the families of the missing. And one topic we talked about a lot is forensic. So I was wondering if you could comment on how the process was. Like, how did you build trust with the survivors that they tell you these really painful stories?
I think like each of us would have different answers to that question. I don't know if you want to tackle that question first, and maybe I could go next.
Yeah, well, about the project has been a long way, I think. But me personally, something that I have learned working with survivors, it's the importance of being there. The importance of being there beyond our projects, beyond, well, whatever thing we're doing in that moment. And that trust is built over time by looking at you, by accompanying the community in different events. And it's tested sometimes by different things, like gossiping, for example. And yeah, it's pretty much the accompaniment all the time, be there. And be there beyond, let's say your PhD is done or your master is done, because I worked with a grassroots organization when I was doing my bachelor degree. And one of the things they told me is that they suffered every time someone decided to leave and just abandon the community or abandon the movement. And so that's something I learned since I was very little, I could say.
And so I think from the overarching perspective of the project itself, the partnership with Asociación Sumpul started on the heels of another project. So we were doing a pilot project on photo memory in another community in a different department of El Salvador. And the survivor group had heard about the success of that project and invited us up to talk about the kinds of things that they were interested in, what they needed to advance their historical memory work. And what they wanted at that time, this was in 2016, was to purchase the site where the Sumpul massacre happened, to build a memorial there, and they wanted to fundraise in order to make that project a reality. And so we said, well, we can help you with a strategic plan. And so we worked on a strategic plan with the organization, thinking that that would be the end. So we would just put a few extra days on the other field work and go up, and it took us about 6 months, but we helped them produce a strategic plan. But what that helped us do was understand, like, what were the dreams of the survivors, what are the priorities of the community? And it naturally flowed into a grant proposal in which we could support that. And there's a lot of serendipity as well in terms of the right people being involved in the project. So when I first went to El Salvador, it was as an election observer 10 years ago, actually this month. And I thought it was a one-off trip. I was going to accompany a democratic process, and I was sent to an election site with an architect, a Salvadorian architect living in Belgium. We were together for one day, but we stayed connected for many years. And so in 2016, a couple of years later, when the survivor said, "Do you know any architects?" I said, "I know one, and she's Salvadorian." It's really weird. So people have flowed into the project in a way that is really organic and natural. We haven't put together a team of hotshots, right? Because that is not a productive working environment in a collaborative setting. Although they're all hotshots, but I mean, like, you know, it's not a team of people from Harvard and Yale and Princeton is my point, right? And so people are in the work for the right reason. And I think, as Adriana said, the community sees us coming back year after year and following through on promises and projects. So if we say we're going to do something, we do it, and we come back with those results. And working against an extractive research model. So a lot of researchers are trained to go in and take data, just going back to Tom's point, write a dissertation or an article, maybe in English, and then publish it, and no one from the community even knows what has been done with their stories. And so we really don't work with that kind of model, right? The survivors set the priorities of the projects, and they can see that that's what we follow through on, and so it works. The relationship building, that solidarity, that accompaniment, it goes in both directions as well. The two architects involved in the project lost a child in 2018, and the survivors were there for them. Like, they called them, they held a mass simultaneously with his funeral in Belgium. And they were an incredible support system for two people who were going through like an unfathomable loss. So that trust is built through relationships and time and support that goes in, you know, many directions.
Yeah, Mandy, can we take one question from Zoom?
Yeah.
Okay. So here it says, fascinating project. From the linguistic standpoint, have the team considered the value of the resulting parallel corpora, where text in several languages are aligned in context? Plans to make it open access? Protection from possibility of being incorporated in automate translation project. I'll be happy to ask it all if it's possible. Pick it.
That's a question for you two.
Because
Can you repeat it, Shola? Like just about the crux of it?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. In the chat.
Yeah.
Hold on.
No, down. Down.
I have the chat open. It's on the opposite screen.
Yeah. So, you can repeat the question for me? It's about if you use automated translation.
No, que si hayamos considerado publicar todo como el corpus que hemos estado recogiendo y lo de la. Sí, planes de abrir el corpus y también de comparar ese corpus con otros corpus en español o de otros idiomas, o sea, como va a ser comparativa. Okay, también, ¿cómo vamos a proteger nuestro material de ser los bots, o sea, de los, ¿cómo se llama? De la inteligencia artificial que lo traduzca o lo usen para machine learning y
I'm going to try to answer a little bit, but María Laura, you can help me to complete the ideas.
Yes.
So, when I began in the project in 2019, I think, I received my first translation task. One of my first question was, who is the person I can ask like for different words and vocabulary? And there was always somebody before who made already research and documentation. So when I advanced in the project, one of the discussions was, how do we gather all of this? And when I graduate, the next translator or the next transcriber is able to get the information and not to do all the documentation again. So we begin like to create those documents with different levels of specialization because we are students. And one of the things that we think is a good idea is to do like an external glossary, for example, because at this moment, the glossary and the databases that we use are just for for the use of the team members. But the idea is, for example, in the future, if you have a video and you have the terms that this person used in the video, to maybe put it in the description of the video, or maybe put the link for a public glossary. That's maybe for future projects that we need to discuss more. Because it's, as I was trying to say, it's cultural patrimony, it's linguistic patrimony, it's the Spanish from a specific period of time in El Salvador. So we know that a transcription is a material that can be used for multiple studies in different disciplines. So if the transcription is well, like, registered and in a, I don't know, repositorium, it can lead to multiple researches in other universities. I don't know how much the project is thinking about publishing that in the future, but we are doing at this moment everything that is necessary for this document to be useful for these kind of things. Because the first thing is to have the good transcription, and after that you can decide how to work with that, I think. I don't know about the automated thing. I don't know if I understood the question, I'm sorry.
Yes, I don't think we've discussed that. We've discussed about using automated translation for the first part of the translation process, because that's what we do. We start with an automated translation and then we work over that. But the question is about AI, like kind of harvesting texts to do this machine learning stuff. So I don't think we have thought of that, and it's a very important part of our, like, how are we going to protect, how are we going to publish all our data so that it cannot be used in that way, maybe.
Or maybe it can be to improve.
Yeah,
AI.
maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe
We need to decide on that if we want to do that or not.
I mean, it depends on what we want, because if we want to give the intelligence, the knowledge necessary to do better translations for Salvadorian people, maybe it could be useful. So I don't know. I think this is like very recent, and we need to discuss about that. Yeah.
We do, all of the material that we have, for which we have permission to share, will be up on a server. So we're in the process of purchasing a server, because we have things like the song archive that Dr. Ansari is working on that need a space to live online. And so that seems to be the best solution. And so all of the maps, all the videos, really data heavy stuff will be up there. Some of it will be public facing for people to access, most of it, because we have an open data orientation, and things that need to be, just for the team will be held in a password protected space. But so we are working, we have a website, it's a little bit out of date. We're updating that. Thanks to Giles Whitaker over there, and we will eventually have this server with all the data. I think we're out of time.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Well, anyway, first of all, thank you, Mandy and the team, for the fascinating presentation. We look forward to more updates in the next 4 years, and thank you all for coming. Actually, I can tell you something that even though their presentation is fantastic, other presentations at FIMS are also kind of okay. So we are hoping that you'll come when we have other presentations. Thank you for coming.